Hey, g'day everybody, Mark here. Having a bit of workout in the blazing temperatures of England for once. Not that hot actually. It's about 33 degrees now, but I don't care. All right, got quite an interesting video, which I thought I want to do now, even though I'm sweating piles and it's a little bit hot. But I want to talk about it because it's potentially a big problem, and that's in regards to people that are taking vitamin D3. I mean, it's not a great recommendation of mine to take the supplement anyway. Just remember, vitamin D3 essentially is right. It's the same. It's a lot of same ingredients as what is in rat poison, for very good reason. Obviously, it's not the same for us. It has the same effect. But you know, as you can see, I like to get out in the sun and get my vitamin D from foods, which is quite easy to do. But essentially what I'm talking about here with vitamin D, I want to talk about vitamin D, taking vitamin D, how that affects oxygen, how that affects the sugars, and essentially how, when you're taking too much vitamin D, and quite often what will happen is you'll get a lot of viral issues, a lot of flus, colds, skin issues maybe, and this is all to do with the body pulling too much calcium out of the tissues. It's a big problem, and I want to be able to give you a little bit of indication, a couple of clues in regards to how you can gauge whether you are taking too much D3 or when you should stop taking D3. Hang on. Okay, back to the oxygen and the calcium. Two very, very important nutrients that viruses do not like. You know, it's a calcium that keeps viruses at bay. The same as oxygen. Oxygen will kill viruses, and those two nutrients can be greatly affected by taking D3. If you're taking too much, what happens is D3 not only helps your body take the calcium out of the food. If there's too much of it, it's going to pull it out of your body. It's going to pull it out of your tissues. And when you pull calcium out of your tissues, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. And this is when we get into the oxygen. But I want you to think about this for a minute. Oh, let's think about the sugar. Think about the sugar. Oh, let's think about the sugar for a minute. Oh yes, high sugars. Well, high blood sugars will also pull calcium out of the tissues. And that tends to make our skin very vulnerable to viral attacks. One of them is herpes. I'm sure many of you, or some of you, would be aware of either yourself or somebody else who has an issue with herpes. It comes and goes, and if you take note of when there is a flare-up, usually it's because of a sugar hit, or let's say someone goes out in the town, hits a heap of alcohol. Just 1 minute. Okay, I'm back again. Just got a few people banging into. Bit of a muddle this video, but anyway, we'll see how we go. Got some pretty good information coming out of it. Also, going back to the herpes and going back to, herpes virus is kept in control by the calcium. And when we have high blood sugars, we tend to pull calcium out of the tissues, so you actually make those tissues more vulnerable to that viral attack. And this is why quite often people go out that have herpes, they go and have a big night out in the town, consume a lot of sugar with their alcohol, and then they get a herpes breakout. The same thing's going to happen, or can happen, if you load yourself up with too much vitamin D. Okay, you're going to pull that calcium out of the tissues. And calcium's so important for the immune system as well. You're going to run into all sorts of problems when you do this. And when you end up pulling a lot of this calcium out of the tissues, especially out of the tissues, there's a lot of calcium in the tissues. What happens is we actually increase the pH, the alkalinity of your bloodstream. And when you increase the pH of your bloodstream, what happens? Well, two things. Your blood cells are able to pick up quite a bit of oxygen, but at the same time, they can't let it go. It's called the bell curve effect, and it's very common. I see it a lot. And I often mention, you can sit in an oxygen chamber all day long and think you're actually going to get that oxygen into your cells, but if you've got an over-alkaline bloodstream, it ain't going to happen. And when that happens, I've talked about this a lot as well, when you start to lose the ability to deliver oxygen to the cells, you run into all sorts of problems. I'm not just talking about viral issues. I guess it's quite topical now. Regardless of what you think, regardless of what is right or wrong, there's a lot of talk about viruses at the moment. And regardless if they're right or wrong, we need to do our best to be able to minimize our risk to them, because it's important. But other issues like cancer is a very, very big one, because oxygen is the enemy of cancer, and also calcium is very, very important for supporting the immune system. And this is why a lot of people that have a lot of flus, up and down, they get a lot of flus, a lot of colds, a lot of those sorts of illnesses, they're either having sugar issues, well, they've got calcium issues. Usually it's because they've got too much vitamin D3. And even when you're taking K2, you can get too much sometimes. You've got to be careful. And I'll tell you at the end of the video how you can gauge whether you are taking too much, or at least you've got too much calcium in the bloodstream, which is a real problem. Alright, I thought I'd get to my little favourite spot, my favourite little chill out spot. Real good spot to take a video. It's a little bit more calmer here, not around anybody. Getting back to the cancer thing. Taking too much vitamin D3, getting too much calcium into the blood, increasing the alkalinity, reducing the amount of oxygen delivered to the cells having to ferment sugars within the cells for energy production. That creates a lot of lactic acid as a byproduct. That lactic acid starts building up in the tissues. What do we have? We have an environment conducive to tumor development. This is where a lot of the acid comes from. I talk about this a lot. But I guess, cancer is one of them. Energy is another big one too, because our energy was shut down by about 18 times when we're not producing energy, when our cells aren't producing energy with sufficient oxygen. But the viruses, it's a big one. Most people that have a lot of viral issues is because they don't have much oxygen. To think about the flu season. What are people doing? They're sitting down over Christmas eating lots of chocolate and sweets and high sugars, and they're not moving. They're not getting much oxygen. What happens? Oh, we have the flu season. Surprise, surprise. Geez, it's I'm a little bit all over the place here, but I'm going to try and finish this off. One of the best ways to gauge whether you either have too much calcium in the bloodstream, and this might be because of high sugars, or because you've got too much T3, is to measure your urine pH. Urine pH needs to be low. If urine pH gets, and this is consistent, this is 2 hours away from eating anything, just remember this, yeah? But a urine pH of 6.4 or above, you should stop taking D3. You've already got way too much calcium in the bloodstream. Okay? There's a very, very high chance this is the case. And if that is the case, you're opening yourself up, you're putting yourself at the risk of these things. You're putting yourself at the risk of viruses. You're putting yourself at the risk of cancer development. This is where this stuff comes from. Yeah? Not everyone that gets a virus gets infected, gets sick. Depends on the amount of oxygen they've got. Makes a big difference. And how low their sugars are and whatnot. So 6.4, be consistent, do it over a few days. And if if you find that the reading is coming in too high, you've got too much calcium. You've got to know why. First thing I do is look at your sugars, your fasting sugars, to see if they are anywhere near 100, way too high. And if that's the case, just know that you're putting yourself at risk. Yeah? Life is all about minimizing damage. Stuff is going to happen. There's very little that's going to happen. There's very little that we're ever going to manifest in regards to our health, diseases, illnesses, conditions, symptoms, whatever, that isn't already in our bodies now waiting for the right environment. We have to do our best to make sure that we don't give our body that environment. We give it an environment conducive to it, knowing that we're vital, we're alive, we have energy, we have oxygen, we have low sugars. So be very, very careful with vitamin D3, okay? Aside from the fact it's basically rat poison. And the reason it works with rats is because basically overwhelms the kidneys with calcium, and then rats just die. And of course that doesn't do it to us because we're humans and the dose is a lot less, but still you get the picture. Be careful. And yeah, be very mindful about what you're doing. Be very mindful about taking some of these readings. Be very mindful about understanding what your body's telling you, so that in the years to come you don't go to the doctors and the doctor says, I have some bad news for you. You have a tumor. In reality, you had the beginnings of that tumor maybe years ago, but you just weren't looking. Have a fantastic day.